Every morning, we wake up and tell ourselves a soothing lie that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow we will start over. Tomorrow life will fall into order. But Jung warned us long ago. When the unconscious drives us, we repeat an old life cycle and mistake it for fate. The problem isn't that we don't know how to organize our lives. The problem lies in the unconscious part that has created a familiar version of us, one that needs chaos as an excuse to avoid what we truly fear. The mess isn't just on the desk or in the schedule. It is a psychological structure, a subtle defense layer to keep us from facing important intentions, procrastinated conversations, and forgotten dreams. Chaos, according to Jung, is no accident. It is a signal from the shadow. It keeps us in the safe zone, familiar yet confining. So the first question isn't how to organize life. It is, what in you needs chaos to survive? What in you fears the light of clarity? Jung always reminded us that change only begins when we dare to look at what we've tried to evade. Now ask yourself, if you continue living just as you are now for another 5 years, who will you become? Reflect on it, and the answer might shock you. And it is precisely in that moment that the true journey of reorganizing life begins. If this resonates with you, subscribe to SYC Soul for more insights that cut straight to the soul. Hit the bell so you never miss a video that might just change the direction of your life. Now let's return to why chaos isn't the enemy, but the messenger. Chaos is not accidental, but a psychological structure. Number 1, chaos is not accidental, but a psychological structure. Chaos is not something that happens randomly in life. It is not a stray wind blowing through the workspace, the schedule, or the mind. For Jung, chaos is a deliberate psychological structure, a subtle defensive form that the shadow erects to keep us away from truths we lack the courage to face head-on. People cling to messiances not because they like disorder, but because it allows them to evade responsibility for the most important thing in their lives. A cluttered room, a fragmented schedule, and a to-do list that stretches on and then fades into oblivion all share one thing in common. They give us a reasonable excuse to procrastinate. They make us feel we're not ready yet. And when we're not ready, we don't have to confront what makes us uneasy. Try recalling a familiar moment. You know you should start a project, mend a relationship, change a habit that's harming you. But instead of acting, you find yourself picking up small items on the desk, scrolling through old photos, swiping through a few apps, half-heartedly tidying a drawer you had no reason to open. Those tasks don't move you forward, but they give you the illusion of busyness. Busyness means you don't have to face what's deeper. That is how the shadow protects you in the way it deems safe. It keeps you in the old terrain where you're not challenged, even if that terrain is dragging you down. Or you might recognize this most clearly when observing moments of your own distraction. For instance, when you sit in front of your laptop intending to do something important, right? Then you remember you need to check messages. You spot an item on the desk that needs tidying. You suddenly feel like going online to look at something unrelated. This is no coincidence. These are signals from within pushing you away from the difficult task. The brain finds every way to pull you back to the comfort zone, even if that zone is narrow and stagnant. Jung believed that everything we avoid doesn't disappear. It simply slips into the lower layers of the mind and creates subtle undercurrents. External chaos is often just a map of internal conflicts. We become cluttered when our minds are scattered. We live in disarray when our inner world is pulled by unaddressed emotional currents. Not because we're incompetent, but because the shadow always chooses the path of least pain. It doesn't want us to advance. It wants us to be safe. And safety sometimes is just an excuse to stay stuck in place. Going deeper, we must face an uncomfortable truth. Every time we choose the easy over the necessary, every time we say tomorrow instead of acting, every time we let ourselves drift on emotions rather than purposeful action, we are teaching the brain that chaos is familiar territory. Familiarity makes us comfortable. And what makes us comfortable gets repeated. We think we're lacking discipline, but in truth, we're just reinforcing a behavioral pattern. A pattern repeated long enough becomes part of our identity. Jung called these repetitions reactive archetypes. They are deeply ingrained psychological patterns that always pull us back to the old orbit, even when we want to move forward. A person who always lives in disarray is not someone lacking ability, but someone guided by an unconscious pattern, protecting them from what they fear confronting. Distraction becomes a habit. Habit becomes instinct, and instinct becomes the unseen controller of a life we don't fully perceive. That is the truth. A chaotic life is no accident. It is the result of small decisions accumulating into a psychological structure. We don't notice because it all happens quietly. But that quiet is powerful enough to steer an entire life. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." So chaos is not your enemy. It is the voice of the unhealed part of the soul. When you truly understand this, you begin to see how you've been protecting yourself in misguided ways. And once you recognize that shield, you can set it down. Only then can you step forward, not in reaction, but in awareness. The root of disorganization, identity crisis. Number 2, the root of disorganization, identity crisis. So where does it come from? The deepest root of disorganization lies not in habits or time management skills. It begins in far more smoldering terrain. Jung called it an identity crisis. When a person doesn't know where they're headed, every action becomes disjointed. When we don't know who we are, every choice lacks an anchor. Even the most perfect schedule collapses when the one operating it has no inner axis to hold on to. Disorganization is not the cause. It is the symptom of a wavering self. An identity crisis is when a person asks those seemingly simple but profoundly difficult questions. Who am I? What matters to me? Whose expectations am I living by? And when these questions have no answers, or worse, when each answer contradicts the self, the mind falls into a state of fragmentation. We work not because we want to, but because circumstances push us. We choose not based on values, but on external pressures. Consider a familiar example among those entering adulthood, especially Gen Z. They are expected to stabilize early, get a job, have income, and present a polished image to society. But deep inside they don't know what they truly want. One part wants to pursue passion, another fears risk. One part craves freedom, another fears breaking from family. This split makes them live two lives at once. By day they try to appear strong and focused, but by night they sink into emptiness and doubt. Disorganization arises not because they lack ability, but because their minds carry two different maps. Jung believed that when identity is unformed, people easily slip into roles others expect. We become the beautiful child, the model employee, the accommodating friend, the over-reffing partner. But if we live in these roles too long, we eventually lose the sense of the I, and when I lose direction, life loses structure. Nothing gets prioritized. We don't know what to discard or keep. We can't tell true values from imposed ones. From there, disorganization becomes the temporary refuge of a fragmented mind. Someone in an identity crisis often has a schedule full of activities, but an empty soul. They stay busy from morning to night, but when they pause, they don't know what it was all for. A day may pass full of motion, but devoid of meaning. Like a room stuffed with items, none of which truly belong to the owner. This disorder reflects a reality. When you don't know what's important to you, everything seems important. And when everything seems important, nothing gets done properly. Before continuing, take a moment of stillness. Breathe slowly. Does this touch you? Perhaps in this very moment, you're recognizing that disorder within yourself. If so, try writing one utterly honest sentence to yourself somewhere on paper, in a note, or just in thought. Leave a short share, even if only a line. Not for me, but so you can hear yourself more clearly. An identity crisis also breeds doubt in one's own choices. what modern society calls FOMO, the fear of missing out. Commit to A and fear missing B. Do B and worry you're not gooding at a K. This uncertainty shatters every plan. A day starts with good intentions, but ends in confusion simply because we lack a clear sense of self to guide actions. When a person doesn't know who they want to become, they let circumstances decide for them. And disorganization is the inevitable consequence. Jung believed that identity is not something we find, but something we build. And until we build it, everything else remains makeshift. To organize life, we must first reorganize ourselves. We must answer, what am I living for? What truly guides me? Which version of myself do I want to become? Only when these questions take shape can life structure form. Disorganization is a sign that we're living out of sync with our true nature. It's no accident you feel inexplicably tired. No accident you procrastinate, even knowing it sets you back. It is the voice of the self demanding you look back. Detach from outdated roles to realize who you're becoming and who you want to become. At this point, the next step isn't to plunge into doing more, but to gently release what no longer belongs. Organizing life is not about doing more, but letting go. Number 3, organizing life is not about doing more, but letting go. Organizing life isn't about cramming in more tasks, more goals, or more rules. People don't collapse from lack of methods, but from carrying too much that no longer belongs to them. Jung once said that the process of maturation is a journey of stripping away, not accumulation. We don't find the true self by adding layers of shell, but by peeling back what obscures it. Thus, organizing life doesn't start with the question, what should I do? It begins with the far harder one. What no longer deserves to stay with me? The first thing to eliminate is empty commitments. So many people say yes as a reflex, not because they truly want to, but out of fear of disappointing others. Fear of seeming selfish. Fear of losing the image of being nice, kind, always available. But those unconscious nods create a life stuffed with things that don't come from the heart. Jung called this living by the social persona, not from the true self. Organizing life begins with the courage to say no to what no longer fits, even if it makes us awkward or unlike the image others are used to. The second thing to eliminate is goals that aren't ours. Some pursue a job not because they want it, but because their family expects it. Some cling to a path because they once declared it to friends. Some chase a title just to prove their worth. But those goals, no matter how glamorous, are like someone else's shoes. The longer you wear them, the more they hurt. When we walk a path that's not ours, disorganization emerges as the soul's quiet rebellion. It says this isn't our direction. Letting go of wrong goals is the first act of liberation. We also need to eliminate relationships that have outlived their role. Some people were once vital, but now leave only a heavy feeling. Some conversations make us shrink ourselves. Some ties pull us back to old versions we're trying to leave behind. Jung said the soul always senses when a relationship no longer nourishes, but out of fear of loneliness, we hold on. And that clinging freezes life in place, leaving no space for new things to enter. Letting go isn't betrayal. Letting go honors the truth that we've changed. Next, we need to eliminate attachment to the old self-image. Many are disorganized because they're trying to live as the version they no longer are. They keep carrying habits, responsibilities, and expectations from 5 or 10 years ago. They live as if they re-still that old person while the deepest part inside has grown and craves a different shape. But the old self clings stubbornly because it fears being replaced. This very tug-of-war shreds life's structure. To organize life, we must dare to bid farewell to our outdated version. We also need to eliminate illusions of capacity. So many believe they can do it all, believe they just need to try a bit harder. The truth is the human mind has limits. We're not designed to juggle too many tasks, too many goals, too many roles. The mind is like a small room. If we fill it with clutter, there's no space left for what's most important. Dropping one thing isn't failure. It's the wisdom of someone who knows how to protect mental energy. Finally, we need to eliminate the noise in the mind. Noise from comparison, anxiety, fear of scarcity, and fear of inadequacy. Noise from social media where everyone looks perfect. Noise from self-doubt, from fear of judgment. This noise drives us into worthless pursuits just to fill the sense of not being enough. When the mind isn't quiet, we can't hear what we truly want. Organizing life is also about organizing inner silence. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Letting go isn't destruction, but returning everything to its rightful place." When obstacles are cleared, we don't just gain more time. We gain inner space to recognize what we truly want. And when what you want becomes clear, life naturally falls into order. But it is precisely in that moment, when the inner world grows brighter, that we see another hard-to-accept truth. A not insignificant gap still exists between what we say and what we truly do. And that gap is where the soul begins to crack. Number 4, the gap between what I say. The gap between what I say and what I do. The sign of a divided soul. And what I do. The sign of a divided soul. This is one of the deepest cracks in the human soul. Jung saw it not merely as a behavioral contradiction, but as the sign of a soul being torn into fragments, each pulling in a different direction. When words and actions fail to align, a person doesn't just become directionless. They become someone stranded between two inner currents belonging to neither. And it is this very division that sabotages every effort to organize one's life. Some say they want peace, yet cling to habits that keep the mind in turmoil. Some say they want success, yet spend hours each day in meaningless pursuits. Some say they want healing, yet flee from every difficult conversation. This discrepancy is no moral failing. It is the sign that the conscious ego is in one place while the unconscious is in another. Jung described this phenomenon as an inner split where the ego is no longer a unified whole. When a person says one thing and does another, it means they are carrying conflicting values at once. One part of them wants to grow, but another fears losing the safe zone. And every hesitation, procrastination, and repeated mistake stems from that inner fragmentation. Consider a familiar example from modern life. Someone says they value family, yet when sitting beside their parents, they sink into their phone. Someone says they want a meaningful life, yet spends the entire evening numbing their thoughts with mind-deadening content. Someone craves authentic love, yet maintains half-hearted relationships out of fear of loneliness. The gap between words and actions is where the soul gets trapped. It no longer knows what the truth is. Psychology calls this dissonance, but Jung went deeper. He believed this disharmony not only causes discomfort, but splits a person into two egos. One that interprets life and one that lives it. When these two egos drift too far apart for too long, the person loses trust in themselves. They no longer believe in their own intentions, and thus they stop acting. Not because they don't know what to do, but because unconsciously they believe that even if they start, they'll sabotage it themselves. Another form of division arises when people try to live by the values society expects, rather than those they truly believe in. They say they want advancement because they think it matters. But when working, they always lack focus because their soul doesn't want that path at all. They say they need to be busy to prove their worth, but inside they crave simplicity. The separation between true desires and borrowed ones makes actions disjointed. Without motivation from the soul itself, every effort becomes feeble. Someone says they want change yet keeps the same environment, habits, and old relationships. This is like saying you want to adjust the ship's course, but leaving the sails turned toward the old wind. They don't realize that new actions can't take root in old soil. To change a way of living, you must alter the deep psychological structure. When words aren't supported by core values, actions will wither. Here, I want to pose a few questions for you. If your daily actions lead you one way while your words point another, which path are you truly on? And if you pause for just a few seconds, do you dare hear the answer you've long avoided? Jung once described a person as a tree grafted with two incompatible branches. One branch reaches for the light, the other is drawn to the shade. When two opposing forces pull against each other, the tree can't grow. It doesn't die, but it doesn't live fully either. Disorganization in life is the same. It is the consequence of a soul torn between two opposing directions. To narrow the gap between words and actions, start with a dialogue with yourself. Not a rationalizing one, but a deep one. Am I saying this because it truly matters or because I think I should? Do I want this because it nourishes me or because it makes me look better? When a person rediscovers that honesty, they no longer need to force change. Actions naturally align with true values. Organization ceases to be a rigid discipline and becomes a new instinct. And when words and actions begin to match, the soul is no longer divided. It becomes a single powerful, clear flow. And right there, life regains order without strain. And from that very unity emerges a gentle yet profound truth. You don't need to change your entire life to shift direction. You just need to start with one small choice, a vote for the person you want to become. Every decision is a vote for the person you are becoming. Number 5, every decision is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every decision, no matter how small it may seem insignificant, is rewriting the map of the person you will become. Jung believed that character doesn't emerge from a single epiphany, but from the chain of daily repeated choices. No dramatic transformation needed, no grand oaths. What you do in the morning, in moments of fatigue when tempted or falling into chaos, that is what defines you, because the unconscious doesn't care what you say. It only registers actions, and every action is a vote you cast for your own future. Many mistake change for a grand gesture, switching careers, cities, environments. But those leaps rarely produce true transformation. You might move to a new country, but if you carry the old patterns inside, you'll recreate the old life in the new place. Jung called the true process of change individuation, the journey back to the deepest self. And that journey doesn't happen in spectacular outbursts. It unfolds in small gestures, seemingly making no difference, repeated, persistent, and almost invisible to others. Consider this simple example. Someone wants to become a calmer, deeper version of themselves, one who truly listens. That doesn't come from finishing a psychology book or attending a big seminar. It starts when they choose silence for a few extra seconds before reacting. When they set the phone aside to fully hear the other person's words. When they acknowledge a difficult emotion instead of suppressing it. Those small things repeated gradually become a new identity. Identity doesn't form in grand moments. It forms in the ones that seem no one notices. And in the same way, many people sabotage themselves, not with big, wrong decisions, but with hundreds of small choices that go against what they claim to want. Someone wants health, but watches 10 more minutes of video every night and sleeps late. Someone wants confidence, but says another time every chance they get. Each time the unconscious registers a vote, I choose the old me. And when those votes accumulate, identity is reinforced not by dreams, but by habits. Jung once said that people become what they repeat, not what they imagine. This sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest truths to swallow because it forces us to face that the future doesn't come from expectations. It comes from the structure of actions. No matter how beautiful your vision, if you vote for procrastination each day, you'll become a procrastinator. Conversely, if each day you do one small thing toward the person you want to be, no matter how humble, unseen, you're rewriting your destiny. One of the most crucial moments of the day is the morning. Not because it's sacred, but because it's the clearest indicator of the direction you're heading. Someone who spends the morning checking messages, reacting to others' demands, and letting the mind scatter in information fragments is voting for a future pulled by external forces. Someone who devotes the morning to a purposeful act, writing a short passage, exercising for a few minutes, meditating for 2 minutes, and reading a few pages is voting for a directed future. In psychology, there's a phenomenon called the identity effect. When you act in line with a value, even slightly, the brain begins updating identity to match that action. The person reading 2 pages a day gradually believes they are a learner. The one exercising for 7 minutes each morning gradually believes they are disciplined. The one spending 10 minutes journaling reflections gradually believes they are self-aware. When identity shifts, actions become natural. That's why small persistent steps are stronger than any grand plan. Big plans rely on willpower. Small steps rely on identity. And identity is the most enduring engine a person can possess. Ask yourself one simple yet powerful thing. If someone only observed your actions this morning without hearing what you say, what future would they guess you're heading toward? The future of the disciplined or the perpetual procrastinator? The future of someone who knows what they want or someone letting life drift? You don't need to be perfect right away. You just need to cast the right vote today and then another tomorrow. Those votes no one sees, no one applauds, are what truly build you. Those votes are the individuation Jung spoke of. Layer by layer of the unconscious unraveled. Fragment by fragment of the ego unified. Small action by small action becoming the pillar supporting a new identity. If you want to know your future, don't look to your dreams. Look to your small choices in the last 24 hours. They are the most accurate prophecy of the person you will become. The turning point. Looking straight at your life with ruthless honesty. Number 6. The turning point. Looking straight at your life with ruthless honesty. By now, when we've understood that every small decision is shaping the identity of our future, there will be a point where the journey forces us to pause. A turning point. A threshold no one can cross while still clinging to the illusions that have sustained us for so long. And that turning point is named looking straight at your life with ruthless honesty. This is the moment Jung believed a person is compelled to confront their own shadow without cover, without rationalization, without excuses. Because he believed that where your fear is, there is your task. To begin, ask yourself the simplest but most often avoided question: where does your time truly go? Not where you think it goes, but where it actually flows. Where does your time lie in the morning? In focus or an unconscious habit of checking your phone? Does it lie in valuable pursuits or scattered by trivial fragments? When we look straight at the flow of time, we see it's not life betraying us, but us betraying our own goals. The second question is even harder. What nourishes you and what drains you? This is a question many dare not answer because it often forces us to admit a painful truth. There are things we devote so much time to, even though they do us no good. A conversation that weighs on you all day. A habit that saps your energy but you repeat because it's familiar. An environment that numbs you, but you stay in because you think you should. There are also the opposites. Activities that lighten you, clarify you, revive you, but you treat them as luxuries. Jung said, "The soul always knows what brings it alive, but the ego often chases what makes it appear more valuable in others' eyes." And the difference between these two creates the exhaustion we usually call being lost. Next comes the question few dare to face. What are you clinging to just because you've clung too long? People have a tendency to keep investing in old pieces, not because they're right, but because they're familiar. It could be a relationship that's outlived its role, but you hold on for fear of losing your image. A job that's no longer fitting, but you grip because you've poured in too many years. Jung called this the illusion of continuity. We think we're persevering, but really we're just afraid to admit that our old version has died. And like a tree bearing withered branches, we can't bloom the new. And perhaps right in the moment you realize you've clung to the old too long, that's when you need a very small pause, a breath, a doorway opening to ask, if you no longer evade, in what direction would your life shift? If these reflections touch what's weighing on your heart, hold them by following the channel. So each return, you don't walk this journey alone. This is also the moment to unmask the shadow. Not to punish yourself, but to see the true motives clearly. Many chaotic behaviors don't stem from weakness, but from hidden needs. The need for recognition, for safety, for love. Every time you procrastinate, it may not be laziness. You fear failure. Every time you take on too much, it may not be ambition. You fear not being enough. Every time you cling to something expired, it may not be blindness. You just fear the emptiness. When you see the true motive, action can redirect. Without seeing it, we only blame ourselves without progressing. This ruthless honesty isn't meant to wound you, but to free you. Because until you dare look at your life without the ego's filter, you'll keep living in the illusion that things will improve on their own. There is no self-improvement, only confrontation and choice. And the true turning point happens when you see clearly. It's not that you lack time. You're just prioritizing wrong, and your inner world hasn't been rearranged. And when that truth emerges, however painful, it always comes with a profound lightness. Finally, you know where you stand. And when you know where you stand, you can choose the clear path forward. What does a truly organized life look like? Number 7. What does a truly organized life look like? When you've gathered the courage to look straight at your life with ruthless honesty, the next question naturally arises. So what does a truly organized life look like? First, an organized life isn't a schedule crammed with dozens of colorful boxes. A pretty schedule says nothing if it doesn't reflect what you truly value. Because Jung believed that's a swap between form and essence. An organized life doesn't rest on the appearance of discipline, but on honesty with inner values. Nor is it the story of waking up at 5 o'clock a.m., as promised by mass productivity methods. Waking early doesn't make the soul deeper, doesn't make values clearer. If it doesn't fit your personal rhythm, it will only turn you into a copy of someone else. Jung once reminded us that each person has a unique psychological structure, meaning your organization must respect your own biological clock, needs, temperament, and purpose, not society's. An organized life begins with the alignment of values, actions, and goals. This is the sacred triangle of inner unity. Values are the roots. They are what you believe matters even if no one sees. But values are an illusion if they don't flow into actions. Actions are the trunk. They are how what you believe manifests in daily life. Not big deeds, but small repeated ones. Goals are the canopy. They show the direction you're growing. But if the canopy opposes the roots, the tree dies. Likewise, goals must align with values to be sustainable. When these three don't match, you'll feel your life in chaos, no matter how many tools, apps, or methods you use. But when they align, everything naturally becomes coherent. No need to force yourself, no need for tension, no need to prove anything. You're just living true to your essence. An organized life is one not dictated by others' urgencies. This is what Jung would call psychological maturity, the ability to escape the collective shadow, stop living by the crowd's demands, and start living by the inner call. Someone living in a true organization doesn't let messages, notifications, sudden requests, or others' expectations steer their life's direction. They clearly distinguish what's important from mere noise. They don't chase what makes them look busy. They only choose what makes them whole. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." An organized life can be very simple, unflashy, but it has a transparency that anyone living in chaos will instantly recognize. Energy doesn't leak. The mind isn't yanked in multiple directions. That person is present, does one thing wholeheartedly, rests fully, and that fullness creates a sense of steadiness without any productivity techniques. Finally, reorganizing life isn't a conclusion. Journey to become an optimized version by someone else's success standards, but a journey back to living honestly with yourself. As you dismantle layer by layer of chaos, excess relationships, borrowed goals, what's left isn't just a tidier schedule, but a sharper self. Jung didn't call you to become perfect. He only invited you to stop living as if you're a victim of fate. From that moment, Every small choice, every time you say no to distraction and yes to what truly matters, you're not just arranging time. You're rewriting the entire story of the person you will become. If this video shook something awake in you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to SYC Soul, turn on notifications, and join a community that chooses depth over distraction every single day. Your future self is already thanking you. Now, let's close with this. The chaos you're living in right now isn't your punishment, it's your invitation. Answer it. See you in the next one.